So now you start to think about this in terms of theory. You start to think and say, well, yeah, so users innovate a lot. Are they going to innovate more? Are they going to innovate less? What's going to happen here? And so Carlos Baldwin and I think it's on your list to read. By the way, I'm not going to chase you about stuff that you're supposed to read. You just hopefully will read it and so on. So if we look here, what we have is communication cost on one axis and design cost on the other. Now, John Hashem Gibbon is this guy here. He's a single user innovator. And basically what happens is John Hashem Gibbon, here's design cost. John Hashem Gibbon can afford to innovate up to the point that he can pay for it by in-house use or charity or whatever it might be. Okay? So he can only make a design this big. On the other hand, John Hashem Gibbon doesn't care at all about communication costs because he's doing it all himself. Right? These costs can be high or low. He's sitting there for 20 years working away. You know, not an issue. Now, beyond this, we have the green. Namely, if the product was bigger than that before users began to collaborate, what happened was that the producer had to do it because, again, aggregation of demand, distribution across. Now, what users would often do is come up with something that was a small and cheap version of something that, again, the manufacturers would come up with later. But now what happened? Well, with the internet and so on, communication cost has dropped like a stone. And so what has happened is also understanding of modularization has expanded, design. Design tools are increasingly digital and so on, and user-friendly and powerful. And so what happens is that a project that is huge gets divided up amongst users, like Linux. And all of a sudden, you can do huge stuff. So what happens here is, in a sense, the producer is still in there, and he's basically producing dimension of merit improvements, typically where he understands the market. But increasingly, what's happening is collaborative users are becoming viable across more and more of the opportunity space. And as design costs go down, the single user is capable of more. So what you have to imagine is that opportunities here are dots in this space. And as costs go down, all these opportunities are migrating into the space where they can be done collaboratively by users or singly by users. Now, these kinds of tools that you see around, when you look around and you see people creating apps and so on over a weekend, they couldn't have done that a few years ago. When you see people collaborating and crowdsourcing and so on, they couldn't have done that. Somebody coming in with a solution from Russia, somebody else coming in from Afghanistan, and so on and so forth, right? They couldn't have done that. But now they can. And the result is that increasingly the producer is getting challenged, and it's no longer the case that you're having to stand there and say to the producer, oh, gee, you know, what you really ought to do is be really nice to your users and co-develop with them because they are so nice and it'll be therapeutic and everybody be happy. Because what's really happening is, let me go to here. What's really happening is that users are beginning to drive producers out of design.